Hi there again, friends. Mrs. Tucker. Today, as I read through our story, this would be our second read of our story, Mr. Tannen's Tie Trouble. So I'm going to go about halfway through the book in the first video, asking some questions and giving some answers, and then I'll go about halfway through the last half of the book in the second video that you'll watch for today. Okay? So real quick, let's just remember that Mr. Tannen's Tie Trouble can be found in Unit 4, Lesson 16 of our Journeys book. This will actually be the last story that we do for this school year. And our author of this story is Marianne Coca-Leffler. And remember, we learned yesterday that Marianne Coca-Leffler writes a lot of stories based on things that actually happen in her own life. So if you happen to like Mr. Tannen's Tie Trouble, she's written other stories like Clams All Year and Jack's Talent, and she writes about things that actually have happened. So that's why her story is what we call a realistic fiction story. It's a story that could happen in real life, and in this case, many things in Mrs. Coca-Leffler's stories do happen in real life. And so as you're reading, you're looking for characters who act like real people, settings that could really be real places. And in this case, we learned yesterday, Mr. Tanen, in our story, Mr. Tannen's Tie Trouble, was actually the principal at an elementary school that the author's two daughters attended. So he was an actual principal that Mrs. Coca-Leffler knew. And we're thinking as we read through this story, our essential question, how can helping others make you feel good? So, without further ado, let's read some more of Mr. Tannen's Tie Trouble. Mr. Tanen loves being the principal of the Lyndhurst School. He also loves ties. In fact, he has almost 1,000 crazy ties. When Mr. Tanen returned from winter vacation, he received a call from Mr. Apple at the school department. Mr. Apple told him that because many things at the school had to be fixed, there wasn't enough money left for a new playground. So let me pause right there. First of all, let's go over this vocabulary word. This is one of our new vocabulary words. It's the word received. Remember, it has it highlighted in yellow in our book so we notice it. Received means you got something from someone or someone sent something to you. Somebody gave something to you or sent something to you. So he received a call, which means Mr. Apple called him. Now, Mr. Apple called him from the school department and told him that because many things at school had to be fixed, there wasn't enough money for a new playground. So let's think about it. What problem does Mr. Tanen have right now? There's a problem in the story. What problem does Mr. Tanen have right now? Well, there isn't enough money to build the playground. So let me ask this question. Why isn't there enough money to build a playground? Well, one of the reasons why there isn't enough money to build a playground is that all of the money is being spent fixing other things at the school. And remember, it says Mr. Apple told him that because so many things needed to be fixed at the school, there just wasn't enough money left over for a playground. So Mr. Tanen sadly hung up the phone and gazed out at the broken down playground. He heard a clink clank. He looked up to see Kaylee and Alex lugging in a big jar filled with money. Here it is, $148.29 for the playground fund, said Kaylee proudly. New playground, here we come, cheered Alex. Mr. Tanen didn't know what to say. Let me pause right here. Here's real quick. Let's go over this word fund, one of our vocabulary words. Remember, a fund is when you collect money or raise money with special activities and events, and you save that money to be using it for something special. So in this case, these students have collected money to save it for the new playground. So I want you to just think for a little bit, what kind of fund could you start for our school? I wonder what we could collect money for. We could do an activity and save some money. Like maybe new library books at the library or new playground equipment, just like they're doing here. Or maybe new t-shirts, because I don't know about you, but I like my Wagglestown t-shirts. Maybe new books for your classroom. All different kinds of things. All right, so I'm going to move on here. After school, Mr. Tanen sat in his office staring at the jar. He sighed. Now I'm in a real pickle. This is not enough money for a playground. The kids will be so disappointed. Mr. Apple's words floated around in his head. The playground will have to wait. You'll think of something. I wish our account was as full as your tie closet. As full as my tie closet, repeated Mr. Tanen. There's a lot of vocabulary words on this page. Let me go over them real quick. Staring is one of our vocabulary words. Remember, staring means to look at something for a long time. Disappointed. Mr. Tanen was saying that the kids would be so disappointed. Disappointed means being unhappy or sad because something that you wanted to have happen didn't happen. Account. An account is when you take your money to the bank and you actually leave the money there at the bank and they hold on to it for you, keep it safe for you, and you take it out as you need it. And repeated. Repeated means to do something again or to say something again. So, let me talk about first. Remember a while ago we talked about idioms. Idioms are those phrases that we say that don't really mean literally what they say. So here's one of our idioms. Now I'm in a real pickle. So Mr. Tanen says, I'm in a pickle. Do you think that really means he's in a pickle? Like a big, gigantic dill pickle? Poor Mr. Tanen. No, that doesn't mean he's really in a pickle. So I wonder what that idiom could mean. I'm in a pickle. Well, I'm thinking that means that Mr. Tanen has like a problem or something's wrong that he needs to fix. Now, I also want you to notice here is a text feature that authors sometimes do. We have bold print words, and we know what bold print words are. We know that a lot of times authors will write words in bold print to make them stand out on the page, to really get our attention. Sometimes we read them a little bit louder. But I want you to notice too how these bold print words, they don't just go straight across in rows. They're kind of curvy and wavy. And the sentence right before those words said, Mr. Apple's words floated around in his head. So the reason why the author wrote the words like this is to kind of have you put a picture in your mind what it would look like to have the words floating around in your head. So these are kind of like wavy, floaty lines of words. So that's just another way that an author will use a text feature to kind of make the story a little bit more interesting and to help you see it in your head a little bit better. And so he's remembering what Mr. Apple says. The playground will have to wait. You'll think of something. I wish our account was as full as your tie closet. He jumped up, opened his closet, and shouted, That's it! My ties! Lyndhurst School will have a new playground. He looks very happy in that picture. The next day, the entire town was plastered with signs. And here's an example of one of the signs. Mr. Tanen's tie auction, Saturday at 7 p.m. at the Lyndhurst School. A tie for any occasion. All ties must go. I've seen signs like that before. All ties must go. All furniture must go. So, what do you think Mr. Tanen's planning to do for the playground fund? Now, we already read ahead in the story, so you probably already have an idea of what Mr. Tanen's planning to do, and you already realize that he is planning to sell his ties so that he can raise money for the new playground. But if we hadn't gone ahead yet in the story and we were just reading this for the first time, how could we figure that out just by using the words that we just read on the last page where he said, "That's it, my ties, Lyndhurst School will have a new playground." And then what we see on this page. How could we figure that out? Well, it talks here in the sign about having an auction. And if you are familiar with what an auction is, maybe you're not familiar with what an auction is a place where people go to sell things, kind of like a garage sale or a yard sale in a way. And so people bid on those things where they say, okay, I will give you $3 for this, and then maybe somebody else says, no, I'll give you $3.25 for it, and then somebody else says, well, I'll give you $4 for it, and they keep doing that bidding where people keep offering a little bit more money, and then eventually one person offers the most money, nobody else wants to offer any more, and so that person who offers the most money gets the item that they're bidding for or the item that they're trying to sell. So the idea is to try to get as much money for things as you can, and hopefully people like to bid on it or pay a lot of money for what you're trying to sell. So he is going to have a tie auction and all his ties must go. Mrs. Sweetapple noticed the sign on the grocery store window. She called her husband Mr. Apple. "Why is Mr. Tannen selling all his ties? Has he gone crazy?" Mr. Tannen told her about the school budget and the playground money. The town was buzzing all day. Mrs. Sweetapple called Monsieur Bijou at the bakery, who called Cleo at the cleaners, who called Dr. Demi, the dentist. It went on until even Zach, the night watchman at the zoo, got the word, Mr. Tannen is selling his ties. Real quick, here's one of our vocabulary words, budget. Remember, if you have a budget, it means you have a plan on how you're going to spend the money that you have. Now, let's talk about that word budget a little bit. What are some clues that we just read on this page that could help us understand what that word budget means? Well, it talks in that sentence, it talks about Mr. Apple told her about the school budget and the playground money. So the word money is mentioned in the same sentence as budget. So a budget could be a plan, as we already know, on how to raise money for something like a school playground or how to save money for something like a school playground. Now, also, too, let's talk about how are the characters reacting now in the story when they hear about the tie auction. They seem a little shocked, don't they? I mean, they all look a little upset. Look, here's Miss Apple looks a little upset, and Monsieur Bijou and Cleo and Zach, they all look a little shocked. Surprised was one of our vocabulary words we just had. So they're surprised that Mr. Tannen's selling all his ties. But why do you think they're so surprised? I mean, what's the big deal about somebody selling some ties? Well, they're probably surprised that Mr. Tannen is selling all his ties because those things are important to him. His ties are very important to him. He loves his ties. They are probably some of the most important things to him, and he's going to sell them. Now, I know we already read ahead in the story, but let's think about it. What do you think the characters are going to do now in the story, knowing that there's an auction, Mr. Tannen is going to sell his ties? Well, they're probably going to go to the auction, and so they can buy some of those ties to help Mr. Tannen raise some money for that playground, because they realize just how important it is for Mr. Tannen to raise money, because he's willing to give up his own ties just to come up with money for the playground. It's more important for him that the kids have money for their playground than he has the ties in his closet. I think that's a really amazing, awesome thing that he's doing. Right, I'm going to stop there for right now, and I'm going to record the second half of this video in another lesson. But You can go back and listen to this one again if you want to before you go on to the second one, or you can just stop this one and go on to the second one when you're ready. So thank you for listening, and I will talk to you again soon. Bye.